rather than embody his power. He feels like he just needs to enforce it and reinforce it all the time. And it's like, yeah, we get it. You're good at what you do, but chill your boots. Suits, season 1, episode 2, errors and omissions, 43 minutes of pure adult table behavior. Netflix, let's run it back. Welcome back to my channel. It's Liv, living life with locks and learning lessons along the way. And this episode was so juicy, so juicy. It really got the ball rolling with the characters kind of coming to life, and you kind of get a sense of who they are, or you become curious. I'd say that. You become more curious about the depths of the characters in episode 2 of season 1. So it starts off with a client. I'd say a lot of the episodes, as we move through the show, starts off with some sort of situational experience that Mike is in, Harvey's in, Louis Litt's in, Jessica's in, or someone at the law firm is working with a client. So you kind of see a client, or you're in the offices of a client, or client engagement with someone from the law firm in the opening scenes. If it's not the very first scene, it's very early on in the episode. It kind of sets the tone and it acts as like a thread throughout the episode towards the end. So we start off with this really like genius type client. He's an inventor of a product. I'd say he's an inventor versus a businessman. So I'd say there are clients that have more of like a C-suite persona. And then you'll have clients like this one. I think the client's name was Wyatt, where he doesn't necessarily come across as someone who sits in boardrooms or leads an organization strategically, but he's clearly got this product that is of high value, and so therefore having a lawyer on side helps with negotiations and ensuring that you're not messed around with, basically. I actually noted down, because you know I got my notebook, how different personalities and how there are different personas within organizational structures as well. So the person who's the inventor or the founder is not necessarily the person who carries a business forward or brings that product or service to the market space. And so some people are able to innovate and also lead a team through the process of making that business successful. And sometimes those two different hats are worn by two different people. But I also found fascinating, because you know I'm going to jump around. I'm going to jump from the beginning to the end, to the middle, then back to the beginning, then a bit here, then a bit there. I'm not going in chronological order. So if you want a chronological order run back, playback of this episode, then go watch it. like go watch it and then come back here and let's unpick it together. But this is just the way my brain works. It like goes in all these different directions, which I like, because you don't necessarily see the characters in chronological order. You'll see Mike in the beginning of this Suits episode, but then like 7, 8 scenes down the line, you'll see him again, and you have to remember something that was said or something that happened in the first scene, if you get what I mean. So naturally things jump around anyway, but you think that they're happening in order. But there's so many like undercuttings that happen as the series kind of unfolds. But anyway, before I digress, so the whole concept of the adult table. Harvey makes some joke to Mike that he's not ready to sit at the adult table, which is basically to enter the boardroom and be a part of the negotiations around this particular case. But what happens is you actually find out later on in the series, I believe, I don't think it happened in this episode, but you do find out later on that Jessica gave that same like adult table speech to Harvey at one stage. So it's almost like this passing on. So Jessica has passed on wisdom, knowledge, life lessons, mentored Harvey. And so Harvey's mentoring Mike, but Harvey is not necessarily letting Mike know where he learned certain phrases and tactics from, because it's just a part of his shaping, his evolution. But you learn it further down the line. And that's why I said in my previous video about season 1, episode 1, that Mike is to Harvey who Harvey is to Jessica. And you start to see the what would I call it? Is it the roots of the relationship between Jessica and Harvey? It's almost like if you wanted to know or have a understanding or a bit of a preview or flashback to how Jessica influenced Harvey when Harvey was at the beginning of his lawyer journey, you're seeing that with how Mike and Harvey interact. That's what I would say. So it's not exactly the same because obviously the people are different and the way Jessica leads is different to the way Harvey leads. The way Jessica mentors is different to how Harvey mentors. Even down to Lewis Lit, which is what you see in this episode. Mike is having to deal with this sort of tug of war between Lewis and Harvey, because what happened in the first episode was that Rachel explained that there's a chain of command in the law firm in Pearson Hardman, which is what it's called right now, and you see that play out in this episode. And this is why I say that pilot episode was so important. It was so pivotal with understanding the directions that the series goes in. But you see the chain of command and the tug of war it creates for Mike in this episode, because whilst Harvey is Mike's commanding officer, that's the phrase, that's the title that Rachel Zane used, Lewis Lit oversees all of the associates. So technically, Mike is both answerable to Harvey and Lewis. Of course, Jessica as well as the head of the law firm, the head of the organization. It's almost like Mike directly reports into Harvey, but then you got Lewis Lit who can just come in and land something on your desk that he will say should be of equal priority to anything that Harvey gives Mike to do. It's very strange. It's not just strange, it's just the way in which Lewis goes about it. So what I would say in this episode, you see almost like Lewis and Harvey jostling for position with their subordinates, not necessarily with Jessica. So over the series, you see Lewis and Harvey kind of go head to head with trying to impress or trying to prove this, that, and the other about themselves with respect to their leader. So that's when you'll hear them reference more so Lewis about how his billables are higher than Harvey's and all that kind of stuff. But in this episode, in season 1, episode 2, what you see is almost like Lewis and Harvey doing like a versus with each other for a subordinate, which is Mike. But the thing is, Harvey feels like he doesn't have anything to prove. His work shows him who he is. Whereas Lewis has like this kind of, he's got some kind of chip on his shoulder, I'd say. And that starts to come out even more throughout the episode. So that's kind of like the internal law firm dynamics that are unfolding. And I think it's also important to mention that you get more insight into Rachel Zane as well and how her role fits in as a paralegal. You learn that she didn't do well with the LSAT. She doesn't test well, basically, but she's clearly very knowledgeable and very skilled in the legal field. And so she's called a researcher, or not that she's called a researcher, she's a paralegal, but you see her skill sets come out even more throughout the series. And so you see the dynamic between her and Mike. Some of the comments that she made in the previous episode about, well, basically what she alluded to is that Mike's new and she's been there in that law firm longer than he has, so he cannot just call upon her services whenever he wants. But they start to do this little flirt thing throughout this episode, and Mike tries to push the boundaries a little bit. You do see that he pushes the boundaries. And then there's some other lawyer in the firm called, hold on, Gregory Boone, Boone. Now, he don't last long in the series because I don't remember seeing him further down in the seasons. And he almost acts like a light, subtle, minor arch nemesis in the bullpen, I think it's called, where all the associates kind of hang out, or where their little desks are, because they don't have like their own offices and stuff. Rachel got an office. She a paralegal with an office. So she's got status in the law firm, even though she's not a full-blown lawyer. Put some respect on Miss Rachel Zane. You do see Gregory and Mike kind of have this like head-to-head, and I think it's almost like a ode to Lewis and Harvey back in their day when they were younger lawyers, when they were at the beginning stages of their journey. And throughout the series, you'll see flashbacks where you see a younger Harvey or you see a younger Lewis, which is quite amusing at times. It just adds more texture to the whole storyline and the series. Mike has a few people that he experiences this versus dynamic with. But in this episode, you see them two, where basically Mike doesn't know how to do something very basic, but because he didn't go to law school and he hasn't followed the typical traditional legal route to become a lawyer, there's some things that he hasn't mastered or practiced, or processes he just hasn't followed through. Like, I think he needs to file a patent for the Wyatt client, and he asked Harvey to help, but Harvey kind of brushed it off, almost like Harvey has this attitude that some things are just beneath him. I think what was very clear in this episode that I took from this for real life is how important responsibility is. Even though Mike is the associate to Harvey, Harvey has a duty. He has a responsibility to teach and support Mike on his development as a lawyer. And I think in this episode, there are times when Harvey abdicates that responsibility. And so you see this kind of play out in how, or brought to light or highlighted in an exchange between Rachel and Mike, because Mike gets high with a client that Lewis set him up with, because Lewis takes Mike to some tennis court and starts being super weird. So you start to see Lewis in all his glory and not in this episode, and how his kind of persona, his masculinity, how he feels about himself and how he presents himself to other people, and how other people perceive him and feel about him. You see a lot of that. This is why I say Lewis is a bit of a roller coaster, very up and down. I think the word that was used to describe him in this episode was creepy, but at the same time, you kind of love him. You have a bit of a soft spot for him. But anyway, so Mike is dealing with that. But then when he comes back into the office, why? I don't know. He's trapped in the lift with Jessica, because Jessica just happens to get in the lift at the same time that Mike does. And again, her wardrobe be looking very basic, her styling be looking very basic, but she evolves into the Jessica Pearson that I know her to be throughout the series. But in this episode, again, she looks corporate, she looks smart, she's dressed for work, but she ain't giving Jessica. You get what I mean? She's just giving Miss Pearson. I don't know how she ain't pick up on the scent that Mike is high, because that scent is hard to mask. But anyway, then it's a case of drug testing and all this kind of stuff. All this stuff happens in the episode because Lewis is trying to catch Mike out, but I think it's a way of him trying to assert his power. He feels like he needs to really talk about what he has and what he's acquired and stuff. But I think he's threatened by those who just show their power, embody power. Lewis feels like he needs to talk about his power. He needs to say it. He needs to, I don't know how to describe it, enforce it rather than embody his power. He feels like he just needs to enforce it and reinforce it all the time. And it's like, yeah, we get it. You're good at what you do, but chill your boots, relax. Mike is dealing with this tug of war between Lewis and Harvey, and Harvey's not teaching him the way that he had hoped. And so Rachel brings this to light, basically saying it's not your fault what's happened because Harvey faulted you, basically. Harvey could have done better for you to help you do better for yourself, the case, the client. They did something wrong with the patent filing for their client and stuff, which caused a bit of a hiccup. All of that error wasn't Mike's. So what Harvey actually does do, which is good, or shows his leadership, is he absorbs the fault from the client end. So he takes on the blame of the error that was made by Mike. He doesn't use Mike as a scapegoat. He takes responsibility in the face of his client's anger or disappointment. But then what he does, which I don't like, is that the way he then communicates it to Mike makes it seem like Mike was at fault when actually Harvey faulted Mike by not listening to Mike. This is why I say leaders need to listen as well. There's learning that happens by leaders and there's learning that happens by those further down the chain of command. I feel like Mike needed to be listened to when it came to Harvey so that Harvey could mentor, lead, support, teach better so that they both could work as a team to get the job done. So that was a big thing in this episode. Also in this episode is kind of snippets of what's to come. So a part of the case that Harvey's on requires him to go to court and face a judge. Now this judge, Judge Donald Pearl, I believe his name was, although I only heard his first name mentioned in the episode. But you learn a bit more about Harvey through his altercation with this judge. So he's in a courtroom and this judge is quite disrespectful, addressing Harvey by his first name. And Harvey's like, no one outside of family, friends, close associates and clients address me by my first name, and especially not in open court. But this judge clearly has an axe to grind with Harvey, and it's not until they're in chambers, when they're basically in the judge's offices, where they kind of hash it out, because Harvey wants to understand what the judge's problem is. I mean, I as a viewer wanted to know what the judge's problem was, because I didn't like how he was manhandling Harvey. Like, the crazy thing is, if I had not watched this series before and this was episode 2, this is what I mean by you can easily just jump to the defense of the main characters, because I'm like, with Harvey, as cocky and arrogant and full of himself Harvey is, you still respect him, right? And so I've obviously developed an affinity for all these characters because I've watched this series numerous times. But you do see why Harvey would be feeling some type of way, feeling rubbed up the wrong way with the way this judge handled him. So unprofessional. And so it turns out that the judge believes, or the judge accuses Harvey of sleeping with his wife. And Harvey is like, no, not me. Like, that can't be me. I mean, he doesn't say that. He doesn't deny it straight away to the judge. But you can tell that he's a bit dumbstruck by this accusation. And you learn later on in the series, but not in this episode, but later on in this, well, you do hear it mentioned in this episode, but you understand the context more, or the background behind it more throughout the series, that Harvey does not mess with married women. Good Harvey. So that's why when this judge is accusing Harvey of having an affair with his wife, who turns out to be Adnan Salif from Scandal. So when I saw her, I recognized her as soon as I heard her voice. So basically it went to this art gallery where she's the curator or whatever. And you hear her voice before you see that character appear on screen. And as soon as I heard her voice, I scribbled down Adnan Salif, because she is from Scandal. Like, oh, obviously actors, actresses, this is their job, so they are going to be in different things. But what I find fascinating as a viewer is that you see characters pop up, or that's what my brain does, as I said in the previous video, is like my brain will like see a face, recognize a face or a voice, and be trying to sift through all the information where I remember them from. And as I said, I'm only referring to the people that I'm talking about by the character that they play in the show that I see them in, or have seen them in if they're in more than one. I'm not mentioning actors and actresses' names, because the characters are the ones that have come into life for me. So anyway, the wife of the judge is Adnan Salif in this episode of Suits, and this is the only episode she appears in. Her name is Lauren, but the character I know her well to be is Adnan Salif from Scandal. So she clears it up with Harvey to basically say that that's what she told her husband, even though it's not true. So Harvey did not have an affair with this man's wife, but this man was told by his wife that Harvey had an affair with his wife, and so that's why he feels some type of way about Harvey. But then it gets all the way to the end of the episode on this particular story arc that she's filing for divorce, and so then Harvey's now free to do what he wants. Like, if he wants to sleep with her, he can. If he's not going to, it's not the judge's business anymore. And Harvey ends up sorting out the case that involved that judge anyway. So that was something that I found quite interesting in this episode, where you're just like learning stuff about Harvey and the way that people in the legal space receive Harvey or treat him as well. And sometimes it is unfounded, and in this case it is unfounded to treat Harvey disrespectfully because you think, or you've been told, that he had an affair with your wife. Because if you know Harvey's story, story, which we will come to, there's a reason why Harvey doesn't mess with married women. But I'm not going to spoil it too much, but I'm just going to let you know that there is a reason, like a solid reason why his moral compass keeps him as a gentleman in that specific aspect. Still a bit of a womanizer. Yeah, Harvey will easily be with different women every night, every week, whatever, as you saw in the pilot episode if you watched it, and if you haven't, go watch it and then come back. So you see a lot of that with Harvey. Like, he flirts with a lot of different women and he's in and out of relationships throughout the series, but he has a good heart. Harvey's a nice guy. I like Harvey. He definitely matures in terms of personal romantic relationships throughout the series. He has a lot to learn. I think it's because, you know, he's pretty. He's like super attractive, and as I said, he like dresses so well and carries himself so well, and he does treat women respectfully. It's just he doesn't settle down. He's not committed or anything, so he can whip through women quite quickly or swap them out in and out quite a lot. Like, he's got a lot of depth of character to develop when it comes to being a man to a woman. But I do love Harvey. I really do love Harvey. I think one of the last things, or probably the last thing I'd probably talk about with regards to this episode, is the locations in which some of the exchanges happen. They popped out to me more. I don't know if it's because I'm doing this level of analysis of the episodes now, where it's making me look at things, but there was an exchange between Lewis and Mike in the printing room, or like the stationery room. It's where the printers are and where you see files are kept, and where you see, in this particular episode, Mike is reading some Bainbridge briefs. That's what they were called. So I believe they were tied to a specific case that Lewis was overseeing. And it made me think, oh, there's quite a few things that happen in this printing room. You have like penny drop moments that happen in that printing room. I say that, and the first thought I had after that was, I'm sure it's got carpet in there, so you wouldn't actually hear a penny drop. Oh, is that a bit of analysis? Because there's like penny drop moments that happen in there. Like later on in the series, that's where two characters kind of succumb to their feelings for each other. That happens in the printing room, but also something happens with Donna, like she confesses to something, or her and Mike have an exchange. These are all things that are coming later on. So let me not say too much right now. Let me stick to this episode. But yeah, I'd say the printing room is almost like a revealer in a way, or I feel like it humanizes them. I'd say the printing room humanizes the big characters in the law firm. So you see a real exchange between Mike and Lewis, where Mike doesn't, because Mike is not supposed to be doing the Bainbridge briefs. The Gregory guy was gonna trade doing Mike's patent filing with Mike doing the Bainbridge brief proofing, or whatever it was, that whatever task he was set. And so Lewis finds Mike in there reading them. Now, obviously, Lewis knows who he's assigned those tasks to, who he's delegated tasks to. So he's seeing Mike doing something that he knows, Lewis knows he gave to Gregory to do. But Mike doesn't rat out Gregory. And Lewis acknowledges that and says, it shows that you're loyal to your fellow associates. So I would say this episode has a lot of threads about trust and loyalty. And so it's interesting what the episode is called. It's called Errors. Mike makes an error. I'd say Lewis has a lapse in judgment. Harvey obviously falters on how he mentors Mike. Jessica, she probably knew, but she didn't allude to it or bring it to light in this episode, but she didn't pick up on the fact that, or showed that she picked up on the fact that Mike was high when he came back into the office. So they all kind of make mistakes. And then the omission side is Harvey doesn't necessarily let on why he doesn't sleep with married women, even though he says he doesn't. Then you've got the wife who never fully told the truth, so she omitted certain details. So yes, she saw Harvey on a particular evening at an event, but they didn't go home together. Then you've got the judge who omitted saying why he had a problem with Harvey straight away. And then obviously you got Mike here not necessarily saying the full story as to how he ended up doing the Bainbridge briefs or whatever. So you see that. And then the other side of it is the trust, the loyalty. Harvey felt that Mike broke their trust because Mike promised not to get high again or to do something that could jeopardize his career or go back to the life that he was living before he stumbled into the interview. And so Harvey felt that his trust with Mike was broken by Mike. And then obviously you've got Lewis testing Mike's loyalty to see if he's going to tell the truth about a fellow associate, if it's going to make him look more favorable or whatever. But Mike sticks to the story that him and Gregory set out. And as well as the print room, you've also got the like bagel stand outside of the offices. So they earn all this money, clearly, but they will still have something from like a sidewalk stall, like where they sell food. So you'll see Harvey eat bagels and you'll see them get hot drinks and things, which I find it's an interesting contrast. It's like lawyers still gotta eat, but it's clearly they're eating on the move. He's fully dressed in this suit that's of high value, clearly, but he's not always sat in a restaurant or at a bar. Sometimes he's just grabbing a bite whilst he's picking up some details, some information about a case from Mike, or have these exchanges outside. I like how they have scenes inside and scenes outside. So it shows almost like the case in movement. All of these things that I'm just thinking about more and more as I watch and dissect the episode, the season, the series. To wrap up, I would probably say listening to the script at a different level has made me hear things that are like, oh, seed planted. Oh, I know that link because I know what's coming. So something Donna says, I think Mike is asking for help with this patent filing thing that he doesn't know how to do. And he's asking Donna for help as a legal secretary. So she may have, so even though she's not a lawyer herself, obviously being around Harvey and being in law offices and stuff like that for several years, she's very experienced at her role. And you see Donna's character evolve over the course of the series as well. Mike's obviously asking her for help, and Donna has these like really smart, sarcastic remarks or comebacks. And something she says is around going into Harvey's bank account and buying a house in the Hamptons, which is interesting because later on in the series, Lewis actually gets a house in the Hamptons. I think it's the Hamptons that he gets a house in order to impress this woman, but that's later on in the series. That's not here yet. But I just thought it was fascinating for me. It's like I'm listening to the script differently. I'm listening to the exchanges. And it's not that I'm looking for something specifically, but it's like when I hear something, it does this like ping pong or ricochet through my brain to be like, hold on, she mentioned that here so casually, but I'm sure later on at some point that thing actually happens. May not be for that character that it was mentioned in the first instance, but that thing manifests. So it's like the power of your words as well. That's probably something else I've taken from this episode. The power of your words and the honesty behind your words, the truth behind your words. And do you live up to your own words? Because Donna actually helps Lewis with that house thing in the Hamptons for that thing he's trying to do to impress Miss Thing that he's dating or trying to see at the time. But it's like, it was said here. But anyway, that's it for this episode. If you like these videos, then please like, comment and subscribe and hit that notification bell if you want to see more, if you want to know when I've uploaded another video about another episode in another season, possibly even in another series. This is Suits right now, and Suits is getting good, getting really, really good. I'm so excited to watch the next one and unpick it and see what I kind of pick up as well. Thank you for watching another video on Must Watch Gotta Learn. You can find more commentary for Suits season 1 on my channel, and if you want to be the first to watch any new season or series, then subscribe to my channel. On Must Watch Gotta Learn, we turn our favorite fictional TV series into real life lessons. It has never been more fun to binge watch a rerun.